On today's show, we talk about how cutouts were the pathway for getting started with bees. We discuss Randy's journey, a little bit about swarms, and then we dive into doing cutouts, what you should know, who should do cutouts, and how he does them. It's a great episode you'll enjoy. So we'll get started with the Fast Five. First
All right.
question, what's your name?
Randy McCaffrey, 628 Dirt Rooster on social media.
And what's your apiary's name?
Well, the one here at home, I call it Flat Branch Bee Ranch because we have a little creek that runs behind the property called Flat Branch. It doesn't touch my property, but it's close enough.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it had a nice ring to it.
It does, yeah. And where are you located?
We're in South Mississippi in Gulfport, almost on the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America, depending on when this airs.
Pending the name change, yeah.
Yeah.
What year did you start with bees?
I started in 10 when I was 40 years old.
Oh, yes, very good. And how many colonies do you manage?
I generally run under 50. Sometimes I'll get up to 100 during the year, but I'll sell them all off or give a lot of them away because I just don't have time to. I do so many other things. I just don't have time to manage that many. So
Oh, yeah.
normally 35 to 30 to 50. So we're probably, middle of winter here. We're probably 30-ish. Hate to say I hadn't been out and looked in a little bit.
Welcome to Apiary Chronicles, where we dive deep into the world of beekeeping and the people who make it all happen. I'm Cal Hardage, your host and fellow bee enthusiast. So, Randy, you mentioned you got started with bees in 2010.
Yeah.
Why bees?
I was a contractor, and my brother talked me into helping him with a cutout, and it was a unique situation, unique hive, unique location. Everything about it was just different. It was in an old furniture warehouse built in the 1860s with the big 6-foot iron pulleys and the big ropes to hand crank this elevator up and down with the furniture. And so we had to go in the top of this old building and get to these bees that were in this wall between another wall that was still standing from a building that had burnt down next door. So,
yes.
So it had piled up with debris over the years, and the bees had gotten up in between all this. And my brother had just recently gotten into beekeeping, and him and a friend of his thought they wanted to do some cutouts. And he calls me and says, "I need your help to get to some bees." And I was like, you just need my tools. Come get them, whatever you need." He said, "No, I need your expertise. I need your brain to figure out how to get to them without destroying this building." And so I went and helped him out with that. And I just thought, that was really pretty interesting and a little bit of an adrenaline rush. I didn't have a bee suit. And so I had, we were members of a hunting camp with an old house on it. And I had gotten wind that house had a hive in it, or had 2 hives in it. That's what they thought. And I called the club president, who was my neighbor. I said, "Hey, y'all going to tear that house down out here?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Can I get the bees out of it?" He said, "Oh, that'd be doing us a great favor." So I went up and spent all evening, all night, not having any clue really what I was doing. Had this little cheap, I don't even remember where I got the suit, this cheap little bee suit, canvas suit. And it was hot summertime. When you get sweaty, those suits just stick to you and bees go through them like you're wearing a napkin or something. So, I just got really tore up, 70 or 80 stings, just swollen real bad.
Yes.
My body wasn't used to it yet, but I got some bees out of it. And I got home late at night, came in the house, and my wife gets out of bed and comes in the bathroom, looks at me, and she says, "Oh, honey, what happened?" And, I was like, "I just got through taking some bees out." And she says, What are you going to do? Like, are you going to go to the hospital?" And I was like,
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm going to do it again. And she's like, "I'm going back to bed." So, it's just, I'm a little bit of a thrill seeker, as most beekeepers probably are. So it just turned into that for a little while, and it just was interesting. So I just stuck with it, and then after a while, it got to be where I got a name for myself because I knew construction and wood food bees. So anybody that had problems that needed them gone and didn't just want somebody to come, "If you would love to have some bees," I'm like, "Yeah, I got all the bees I'd love to have, but
Right.
if you need somebody knows what they're doing, that's going to leave your place better than they got there, I'm the guy. So that's how it turned into a job or a business.
Oh, yes. And when you did those first cutouts, what kind of equipment did you decide to go with?
That first one I did, I kind of knew what the structure of the house was. It was an old farmhouse, really another unique build. So my first two were just in super unique properties. This house was built, everything was on 45s. You go in, there's a
Oh, yes.
45-degree wall. You go into the living room that's built on an angle, and then the kitchen is an angle from that. And it's got this big apron farm sink that people would kill for these days. And over on the other side of the kitchen is this big mantle, not high ceilings, 8 foot probably ceilings.
Oh, yeah.
So I go in there and I look, and the bees are between the above the fireplace and behind the chimney, and this chimney steps out, so it's, you know, angled off the sides. And so I called the guy. I said, I think I'm gonna have to do this from the outside, and I've got to tear siding off. You're okay if I don't put it back, right? He said, yeah. I said, all right.
Oh,
So I go around there. I brought a generator and a skill saw, and I just found a stud and made some vertical cuts and started pulling this lap siding off, this old wood lap siding, and just started reaching as deep as I could dig, shoulder depth for a lot of it, and just getting stung and it just I'm not quitting. I'm not a quitter. You
oh, yeah.
can't make me go away. So I'm scooping, pulling out big wads of comb and framing up what I could. I had a little direction from my brother. He showed up for a few minutes, and then one of his kids got stung, and so they took off.
Oh, no.
And a little bit of direction from them on how to frame comb and what to keep and what not to keep, what's brood and what's, because I didn't know any of that. So
Oh, yeah.
I had gotten some old equipment from him, and so I framed up enough to make 2 colonies, and I actually did get 2 colonies out of it. They surprisingly, it was warm enough, and I had bees. I had enough bees on everything that they
Oh,
made
yeah.
another queen in the queenless side. But so I framed them all up in an enclosed trailer and strapped it all down, not thinking about the ride home for an hour. And so
Oh, yeah.
when I get home in the middle of the night and I drop this ramp door on the back, the walls are just covered in bees, and I'm like, oh no. And I've already been destroyed, so I was just like,
Oh, yeah.
here we go. So I put the suit back on, lit the smoker back up, and took a dustpan and a bee brush, which is the easiest thing to piss them off with, is a bee brush.
It is, yeah.
So I'm scooping them in dustpans and dumping them in whichever box and set them out. So it was like 1 or 2 in the morning before I even got in the house. But so my first go at it was a generator, a skill saw, and some kind of knife. I really don't even remember. It's been
Oh,
so
yeah.
long ago, but I wish I had had the foresight to record it, because that would have been a fun one to look back at.
Oh, yeah. It would have been, yeah.
Yeah,
And you had the benefit they didn't want you to put it all back together either.
correct. Thankfully, it had a lot of rot in it, but
Yeah.
they weren't interested in me doing any repairs, which was a real bonus, because I would have had to make another trip to
Oh,
finish
yeah.
the job.
Yeah.
But these turned out to be some fairly hot bees,
Oh,
and so and that was my first 2 colonies, and so I would go out there. My office is at my house. I would get bored and go out there during the day and crack the lid. I still don't have any protection on at this point. I'd crack the lid and see how long it'd take for them to start bumping me or get stung, and I'd go back inside and go back to work. Just, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day I'm out there fooling with them, just because I was curious and interested,
oh, yeah.
and so, just hooked really off the get-go.
I had bees in my backyard for years. Actually, that's where my bees are now. But I had a super seed event, or actually I split a hive and they raised a queen, and they were some of the hottest bees I'd ever been around. They would chase me to the house, so I moved them out in the pasture. And of course, that hive grew better than any of my other hives, and I just dreaded dealing with it. I'd take care of everything
Yeah.
else. Then I'd go down there, and it got to a point I decided, I don't care. I'm splitting it, and I took each super that was on that hive, and it was like 4 or 5 at the time, and I split it all out, so I had 4 or 5 nukes there, or
Mm.
would be eventually. I thought, "I gotta get rid of that queen, I can't survive this."
Well, those hot ones, and I've pulled it. Every year I get at least one hot. I pull enough hives that I get to select from what I want to keep.
Oh, yeah.
And early on, we didn't know what chemical treating was or anything like that. Well, when we finally figured out what all that was, my dad, my brother were all in on it, and they learned that stuff. I don't know, a year or two before I did. Well,
Oh, yeah.
when they started figuring out they wanted to treat and had been treating, and then they started telling me, you got to treat or all your bees are going to die. And I'm like, my bees are doing just fine like they are. So, you treat yours. We'll let mine do what they're doing. We'll see who comes out the best. Well, my dad he's so stubborn. He wants to come over and treat my bees anyway.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and I would be like, stay out of my yard, treat your own bees, leave mine alone. So I would put my hottest hives up front, knowing that that's where he's going to start.
He's gonna go first.
That's where he's going first. So he would call me and he'd go, you got to do something with those bees. I said, what are you talking about? Those bees at your house. I said, what are you doing over there fooling with them? Well, they needed to be treated. I said, no, they didn't need to be treated.
Yeah.
He said, well, those first 2, I need you to put the lids back on them. He was just leave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a good move to provide that barrier there.
Yeah.
Now, with your bees, have they all came from cutouts or the origins of most of your hives?
Most of them, but the initial colony. But there again, we do run a lot of queens from Wonderful Bees or other places that are running pure
Oh, yeah.
Italian genetics and stuff like that. So most feral bees are an Italian variety or a good mix of Italian. So I'm not preferential to any particular type. We've got guys that run straight Russians around here that are commercial
Oh, yes.
beekeepers. We've got commercial guys that run Italians, and that's pretty much it. Nobody else really runs, Carnies or Caucasians or anything. It's either Russians or Italians. So that's kind of
Oh,
what we
yeah.
have a selection of. And so I'll requeen a lot with grafts from Wonderful because they run 1,200 grafts a day. So if I need
Oh, yes.
if I need queens during the season, it doesn't make sense for me to be running, all kinds of boxes to try to make queens. I can run up to their place and grab a few, and we swap out back and forth. So I've actually got his Apamase set up that he won at Nobby.
Oh, yes.
North American Honeybee Expo was just last, week and a half ago, I guess. Week ago, whatever it was. 2 weeks ago now. Boy,
Yeah, time flies.
time flies. So he signed up for Hives for Heroes and as a mentor.
Oh,
And,
yes.
and so it put his name in the drawing for a Apamase setup. So he got a double deep Apamase setup, and I brought it home for him because he flew. So
Oh.
when he gets it back, it's going to have 628 Dirt Rooster painted across the side. Just in case anything ever happens, everybody knows whose box that is.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yeah, it sounds like a great plan there. Now, you've spoken a couple of times kind of towards your philosophy of beekeeping.
Huh.
Doesn't sound like you do treatments. You mentioned leaving bees alone. Can you expand upon your philosophy of how you should manage your bees?
Sure. And I don't care. I don't care if you treat or not. For me, I'm treatment free. I don't care what you do with your bees, either way, whatever. But I see other people that are hardline treatment. If you don't treat, you're some kind of a bad person or whatever. And
Oh, yeah.
and then you look at their numbers and you're like, what are your numbers? Half of them don't even know. They're not doing any tests. They're not doing mite washes or anything. So they don't really know their numbers. They just know I have to treat and I'm using whatever,
Oh, yeah.
Mighty Way quick strips or whatever they're using. But they can't tell you what their numbers are. And then at the end of the season, I'm like, oh, how'd you do? I might have to get a couple of nukes from you next year. And I'm like, oh yeah, for real? That's pretty common. And I don't put my finger in their chest and go, I told you so. Cause I don't, like I said, I don't really care. But for me, it's more of a thing that God made us all, insects, humans, whatever. We can adapt to a lot of things. And I think honeybees are the same way. And I see this in these cutouts that I do is that they can adapt to a situation as long as they're given the right environment. I don't think
Oh, yeah.
they need that kind of help. So, and this is kind of skirting the line of what makes any sense to anybody but me, I guess. If I start giving myself testosterone, if I start taking steroids or whatever, my body will quit producing what it needs to produce on its own.
Right.
And if I come off of that, it takes a long time for your body to recover from that. And I think bees are the same way. If you're chemically doing something for them that their body can do naturally, and also, they got these chemicals that are friendly to the bee, but it kills other insects in the hive. Well, bees are insects as well, and it does affect them. And
Oh, yeah.
it's funny because I don't go deep on that because I'm fighting the tide.
Mhm.
It's really, really tough to talk against treatments when that's what everybody wants to do. And as soon as somebody gets into beekeeping, they're immediately indoctrinated into this is what you have to do. And we're going to talk about mites at every bee club meeting you ever go to.
Yes.
And so I was encouraged, though. There was a lady at the North Carolina State Conference I spoke at this past year. And like I said, I don't go real deep into it in my talks because I show them some data, but beyond that, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't really care.
Right.
But so I spoke about that and showed some of my statistics and some of my data, and she was also speaking there, but she didn't know who I was, and she sat in on one of my talks, and then I walked in about midway through her talk. This is a room of 500 people, so she didn't know I was back there. She wasn't saying this for brownie points or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But she's showing her stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. And she goes, and that guy that was here earlier, something chicken, something, and everybody goes, dirt rooster. And she goes, yeah, that guy. What he was saying is exactly right. And she's some university something, but she has hive minder equipment on her
Oh, yeah.
on all her hives, and she's able to track data and see when bees fly out to forage, which colonies are bringing in. If a colonies get robbed, she can tell you which colonies are doing the
Oh,
robbing.
yeah.
Just a whole lot of data like that. And so when she said that, I was like, man, I got to find out who this lady is and get her information, because what she's saying is backing up everything that I'm talking about. So I just have an opinion that God designs us all to adapt to our surroundings and our situations without the help of big pharma.
Right, right. Well, when we think about regenerative ag, that
Yeah,
movement is moving away from all these things we're using to prop up
it is.
land, prop up forage, prop up cattle. The others propping up bees, trying to
Yeah.
go more natural. And yeah, I figured the Lord does a much better job at that stuff than we do.
And that's why, I'm not a cattle guy, but Carbon Cowboys speaks to me a lot because
Oh yeah.
that's their movement, and they do a really great job of putting it out there in a way that people will receive it and start to
Oh
use it.
yes.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if it's a philosophy other than, don't, I, I almost did a t-shirt. I almost did a couple of t-shirts to wear to Nobby, but I was just like, do I really want to start a fight with somebody? But it's just me having fun. But one of them was, I'm treatment free, just like my bees.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a conversation starter there.
Yeah, that's how you win friends.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah,
So on your hive, you mentioned a little bit earlier on your hives you manage, you'll get up so many and then you like to come back to about 30 or 40 or whatever
yeah.
number that is. Are you actively working to do some splits, or is that just you're gaining from cutouts? How are those numbers happening?
Both. So during the year, like this past year, we did 118 cutouts, and that's not including swarm catches or equipment we bought or anything else. Because
Oh, yeah.
I did buy some other people's equipment, some other hives, and swarm catches. I think I was at, I don't know, somewhere in the mid 20s. I don't even know the exact number, but 118 cutouts. You're gonna, 190 of those, 100 of those were good, healthy colonies,
Oh, yeah.
and I can't take them all. I don't have the time for them. I've got the equipment for them, and I've got the room for them. I just don't have the time for them. So
Yes.
especially if I'm an hour or 2 hours from home, I have and Mr. Ed makes fun of me for it because I have just like a Rolodex in my phone of beekeepers for
Oh, yes.
for all over the United States, really, because I get calls from all over the United States. So if somebody calls me and says, "Hey, do you have somebody in New York that does hive removals?" I go, "I sure do," and I'll pull up some names and give them. But if I'm a good distance from home and I don't want the bees in the vac for that long, or if I've got
Oh,
somewhere
yeah.
else I have to go, I'll call around and say, "Hey, if you got equipment, can I come by and dump some bees?" And I'll go drop them off at somebody else's apiary. But during spring, we do we sell nukes, and so we're making a lot of splits, and
Oh, yes.
we're raising queens. So whatever nukes don't sell, of course, turn into production colonies. And so that's, in springtime, I'm generally left with 20 to 30 nukes that didn't sell, and those automatically go into 10 framers and then stay with us.
Oh,
And
gosh.
then during the next 2 months after nuke sales, people that, whether they bought nukes from me or anybody else, they're calling me going, "Hey, do you have an extra queen? I don't think I have a queen." And
Yeah.
you know how it goes with new beekeepers. They've got a queen in there. They just can't find them to save their life. So they're
Right.
wanting to buy another queen. They'll put it in and they'll go, "That marked queen you just sold me, I found her on the landing board dead." And I'm like, "Hey, it's because you got a queen in there.
Yeah.
I told you to leave them alone." But, it's new beekeeping. It's fun and we can't leave them alone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've been guilty of being in my hives way too much.
Yeah.
Now I'm on the opposite end. I've gotta be in a little bit more than I actually am because
Yeah.
I don't know when the last time I was in there.
That's pretty common. Well, I mean, it's good for them. If
Oh,
they
yeah.
if they have the proper space and the proper situation, and they're not just being cooked in the sun or whatever, the more you leave them alone, usually the better they'll do.
Randy, we're gonna talk a little bit more about your cutout process a little bit later, but you
Good.
mentioned you catch a lot of storms. Well, you may get a winter storm. You catch a lot of swarms. What's your swarm kit you take with you?
The everything BVAC is the biggest one.
Oh, yes.
That yellow battery powered vac. That's all my
Well, I emailed them
okay.
telling them they ought to be a sponsor on here.
Yeah, yeah, he should. So that's Tony Andrick. He developed the everything BVAC. That's allmybees.com. And, before that one, everything was a powered vac. And so if you brought a powered vac, you had to have a generator, which
Right.
back then I had one of those giant, heavy Champion generators. It took two people to throw it in the back of a pickup truck. And so there's a lot of shaking and scraping and brushing and praying that goes on with not using a vac on a swarm catch, unless they're hanging
Oh,
out on
yeah.
a flimsy little limb and you can just bump them in a box. That's so nice. But a lot of times they're on a main branch of an oak tree and you can't shake them. You can't really brush them off. So the everything vac, it's phenomenal at catching swarms. It does it in a matter of a few minutes instead of a couple of hours out there fooling with these bees.
Oh, yeah.
And because it's battery powered, you don't need any equipment, and it's so light and it's got a backpack to it. You could literally show up on a bicycle and catch a swarm. But aside from that, usually an extension pole and a bucket and, painter's extension pole. And if I need to get something high, I'll tape a bucket to it, boom, get up under and bump them and dump them in a
Oh, yeah.
box. And just a screen box or a easy nuke or something that I can close up, keep them in it. And then when I get home, I dump them in whatever situation I want them in, and I lock them down for 48 hours.
Oh, yeah, lock them down for 48 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and don't, if I have an old brood frame and they're in a hard spot to get to, I'll lay an old brood frame up and let them walk on it. And they'll, after a little while, come back and get it because they'll cluster up on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you really like that everything BVAC.
Yeah, I do.
Works really well.
There's one of the motor heads right there.
Oh, yes.
So
Well,
if you're not familiar, this screws onto a food safe lid that goes on a 5-gallon bucket, and it has a screen separator. So this and also the bottom of the motor screen, but it's battery powered. So
oh,
has
yeah.
And that's variable speed.
And it's not the strongest thing in the world, but it does a great job picking up swarms and doing cutouts. It'll run for 6-8 hours. You can use it on a cutout. It's not running that entire time though. You're not vacuuming the entire time, but it'll run for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And when you get good with it, sometimes I'll do 3 cutouts and a couple swarm catches before I even recharge it.
Oh yes.
So yeah, the
I've
battery
used a-
lasts.
Oh yeah, very good. I've used a bee vac just a little bit because years ago I built one and used like a DeWalt wet vac that I built a box around.
Yeah.
It was portable, but it wasn't something you liked to be portable.
Yeah.
By the time I had a high box on there and had that box on there and I strapped them together, it's not something you're going to strap on your back and go on a bicycle with.
Exactly. And that's the way most bee vacs are. And I've got some that are, you have to wear earplugs to use them.
Oh yeah.
And I've got others that are just heavy and cumbersome, and that one's just easy. I've got some powered ones that I like, and that probably the kill rate on that one and some of my other ones is very low. And some of the others I've got will do a faster job without killing bees. But like I say, you got to have extension cords.
You got to have power there.
You got to have power, and it's heavier than that and louder. Yes. And so when you're recording like I do, it's tough trying to record over noise anyway.
Oh yes.
So the less noise I can have, the better. Even if I can't really use much of that audio, it's still better to have less noise. Occasionally there's a comment or somebody's discussing something that you just want to add to the video.
Oh yeah.
If it's over a noisy buckethead vac, you can't use it. But if it's over something like that, where you can literally, I could sit it right here and you could hear it, but we could talk over it.
Oh yeah.
And so if I've got audio over something like that, I usually can use it.
I'm just going to have to play this for my wife because I'm trying to convince her I need one as well.
Well, if you're catching swarms, it will make it a lot easier. It's worth it if that's what you're into.
I don't do very much, but there's some years I may catch a half dozen. I may have even caught into double digits a year or two. But then some years it's like I get no calls. It's just kind of interesting.
Well, then it turns into a piece of rental equipment.
There we go. That's right up my alley too. Yeah. Thank you, Randy. I will be sure my wife is going to be listening. She's going to be so excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Randy, let's change gears just a little bit and go beyond the buzz and talk about cutouts. Cutouts have always fascinated me, but and I'll tell you why they fascinate me. When I was a teenager, we had an old dairy barn on this land we bought, and there was a beehive in it. And I loved hearing those in there. Yeah. And at the time, I had a few beehives, and I tried to do a trap out, and I failed miserably. And I've also gotten some bee logs, and those have not worked out very good for me. But I find cutouts very interesting. However, they look like too much work for me. Let's talk just a little bit about cutouts and getting started doing cutouts.
Okay. Ask me anything on cutouts.
Well, okay.
That's right up my alley.
The first thing, should someone do cutouts? Who should do them? Maybe the better question.
Who should do them is, I jokingly say everybody should do one.
Oh, yes.
And it's funny because if you're in a large group of beekeepers and you ask how many people have ever done a cutout, hands go up all over the room. You might, if it's 200 people, there might be 25 or 30 people in the room, hands up, and you say, how many people have done more than one? Boom. All those hands go down except for 2 or 3.
Oh,
because it is an immense amount of work. It does take some expertise, and there are people that just should not be doing it just for different reasons, maybe health reasons, because it's an extremely strenuous job, and there are dangers associated with going up and down ladders, or most cutouts you're going to run into are overhead work. If you've got neck problems or shoulder problems, you probably shouldn't be doing cutouts because most of your work is going to be overhead. It's not going to be, you're going to get a few of those that are on a wall where you can stand up and work in front of you, but those are in the minority. So if you have knowledge of construction is more important to me than a knowledge of bees. You'll fairly quickly learn the attitude of bees and how they behave when you're cutting them, when you're cutting combs out, and what they'll do, where they'll run and hide, and whether or not you have a queen yet, or if there's
Oh, yeah.
even a queen in there. You'll learn that stuff fairly quickly, but a good knowledge of construction is probably more important to me because it reduces some liability issues you may have, or makes the job safer for you, safer for your customer. You're not destroying somebody's house to get these what is legitimately a nuisance, and
Oh, yeah.
you're in there doing a service, not a favor. Everybody thinks it's a favor. Well, you're not doing a favor, you're doing a service, and
Doing a service.
you should be compensated for it because it's hard work. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and it's not uncommon for me to spend an entire day on a cutout. Me and Pete both,
Oh,
so
yes.
if you're danger prone, maybe find something else. Maybe stamp collecting or something is your
Oh, yeah.
thing. But somebody with a good background in construction is going to do well in the cutout business if they're hard workers and don't mind getting dirty and sweaty and taking a few stings. That's the kind of person that does well in it.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody who just wants free bees, dude, save your money, go buy a nuke. It's so
Oh,
much
yeah.
easier, and it's just as
Yeah.
satisfying. Doing a cutout, you're going to get it'll be good memories for you, but yeah, just buy a nuke.
That's great advice for a lot of people. That's really what I followed for a long time. I don't know, maybe if I get opportunity, I'll do a cutout, but it doesn't hold, I'll be honest, it doesn't hold a lot of appeal to me. Maybe
Yeah.
it's my laziness hitting me harder, but maybe I should do at least one so I can raise my hand then.
Yeah.
When you get into a cutout and you've looked at the situation and figured it out,
Mm.
are you I assume you're making a fairly small hole because you don't want the reconstruction of whatever or the repair of whatever you've done to
Yeah.
be too great. But how big of area are you getting into it with, and what's the process there?
You get a real good feel for that after the 12 to 1400 that I've done.
Yeah.
Like I say, it doesn't take long to figure it out. And construction, I say having a good base of knowledge in construction is important. Construction is not that difficult to figure out. There's all kind of schematics on the internet. Uh, Building codes are pretty standard across the board, across the United States. So a lot of what you're going to see here is done the same in Washington State or New York or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
And with some variations, but not much. The older construction's probably going to be an issue for you where somebody has added on where there was no inspection done, or maybe way back in the day where everything's rough cut and just kind of,
Oh,
wherever
yeah.
they thought there needed to be a board, they put a board. I forgot where I was going. Anyway, if you need to have any kind of insight into what you're going to be looking at, I encourage people that are getting in the cutout business to go into a neighborhood that's being built and just look at the structure as it's being framed, and
Oh, that's
you
a
can
good
kind of
idea.
tell,
Yeah.
especially on 2 stories and stuff. You can kind of tell where these bees might be in a particular wall or a particular floor joist space or something like that. So, because of the spaces that bees occupy, a lot of these cutouts are the same. They're the same thing over and over, but
Oh, yeah.
there's something different about every single one. The way the combs run, or something a built-in that was put over the space where they are, or they're behind a chimney or whatever. There's something different on every one. So if you walk around and look at construction and kind of see how things are framed up, especially in walls, because they'll always go to a high point and build down. So
Oh, yeah.
if you're looking at a wall, look at the top plate area, because if they get in a wall space, they're going to the top plate and building down unless there's something blocking them from that. Same thing with a floor joist space. They build a lot between floors in 2-story homes. So a lot of times you got brick veneer on the first floor and then wood siding above that, and they'll find gaps in where the two sidings meet.
Oh, yes.
Go in, and 99% of the time they're between floors. Even when your customer says they're in the wall, and I know they're in the wall because I can hear them in the wall. Well, sound resonates, And what you're hearing is not bees on the wall, it's bees in the floor space between floors. And so for those, we locate a lot with an infrared because it saves a lot of probing and a lot of drilling and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But if I can't find them with the infrared, I'll drill a little small hole, and I've got fiberglass rods that I'll just run in there because you're not going to electrocute yourself, and you're not going to do any damage to anything. But I'll run in there. If I'm hitting insulation, I'll poke through the insulation and, see if I'm hitting comb.
Oh, yeah.
See if I pull out a rod with honey on it or whatever. And so that way I'm leaving a little hole that's easy to patch, put some spackle over it, put a little paint on it or whatever. But anywhere else, if I'm, and you got to know how to use the infrared. There's a little learning curve to it. Heat travels up. So if you can read from the top, it's better. So if you go upstairs, you go upstairs in a 2-story and it's all finished wood floors or ceramic tile or something that you can't go through the floor to get them out, and you have to go through the ceiling. Well, you go upstairs and read the heat signature and figure out where they are, and then go downstairs and do the work. And so that gives you a really good idea, especially from upstairs, how big the colony possibly is.
Oh, yes.
But a lot of times on apartment complexes down here, they're built on a truss system. So between floors is a 16 to 20 inch ladder truss. And with those, the bees can kind of go anywhere in that floor space, but they're always going to be right pretty close to their entrance. So we know if we can locate where they're coming in, all we need to do is cut about a 2.5 by 2.5 inch hole in the drywall in the ceiling, just enough room for us to get in there, and then we can kind of chase that hive wherever it goes. It's usually right there, and we can usually get the whole thing without getting up in the ceiling much. But so, I tell the places we're going to cut 24 by 24 hole in the ceiling. We'll cut them out. We'll seal the entrance so you don't get them again, because you will get them again. Then we're going to put the ceiling back, and then you do all the finish work.
Oh, yes.
And so most of the time, unless they've been in for any length of time, most of the time we can save the drywall and put the same piece back. And then sometimes we'll caulk the seams especially if it's a heavy texture ceiling, we'll just caulk the seams, and that saves them a lot of time bed mudding and stuff, because the tenants don't want you in and out 100 times. And so the size of the hole, I'd rather start small than big, especially on walls. Normally, if I'm cutting a wall hive out, I don't come down further than about 4 feet, because most of the time that's about as far as they're going to go, and most of the time they're going to occupy one stud cavity in a wall. And I can, even if you don't have an infrared, you can feel the wall and you can feel the heat from the colony, so you know pretty easily where they are. And then so all you do is locate studs, take a T-square and mark it, cut down that stud, and that way you can have something to screw back to.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't look like you took a sledgehammer to these people's house.
Oh, yeah.
And we're, I'm real conscientious about what I do to somebody's house. It's their most valuable possession that they have. So when I come in, we cover everything with painter's plastic, so we're not getting sheetrock dust. And bees defecate on everything when they get inside. So when you do 3 or 4 hours in somebody's house, especially in the evenings, and bees are getting on a light fixture, and then all of a sudden you go to clean up and there's yellow poop stains all over somebody's duvet or whatever. And you're like, that needs to go to the laundromat. But so we cover everything up for that reason. And we keep the holes as small as possible because, we're professionals. We don't want somebody to come in there and go, oh my gosh, what happened? Half the wall's gone. And I see that. I see that a lot on people posting their cutout job on Instagram or whatever. And I'm like,
oh, yes.
Ooh, that's bad.
Now,
now, it's a different story if you can learn on a vacant house or an abandoned property. Those catch hives a lot. So if you can find something that's abandoned that has a hive in it, and you just want to practice, go for it, man. Nobody's going to care. They're probably going to tear the thing there. It's going to burn or rot down before anybody moves into it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that would be a great place for you to learn, or at least start.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can find something like that. Yeah. Now, when you go in, you mentioned you're putting drop cloth down, keeping stuff clean. Are you bringing in like a 10-frame hive that you're going to be transferring those bees into?
No, everything's taken into the. If I'm doing a video on how to frame comb or how to save brood, I will. But
Yeah.
as much as people will tell you, I want to save every bee, they don't really want you to save every bee. They want you to get that out of their wall and get out of their house. That's what they really
They
want.
do, right, yeah.
And so us recording jobs adds an hour to the job. If we
Oh,
bring
yes.
if we bring a hive in and have to set up and rubber band and cut combs and try to keep bees on these combs, or, some people save them in an ice chest and then frame them up when they get where they're going. But in any case, you're going to lose almost all the open brood. If it's open brood, it's
Oh,
going
yes.
to dry out. It's going to get cold. It's going to chill. So saving brood, if it's got a lot of cap brood on it, it breaks my heart to throw it away, but it's so time consuming. It adds another, probably legitimately for most people, it add another hour to the job to bring a hive in, set it up, band your frames, frame comb, set it all up and try to get it out of there without destroying it. And then when you get home, all that rubber banded comb, it never fills out a frame properly.
Oh, yeah.
And from now on, it's relegated to a brood box. So you can never put it in an extractor. And most of the time, you're going to let them run on that, and you're going to cycle that out for a frame with a good foundation and heavy wax on them, let them build that out. So you might be saving a lot of brood, but you're costing yourself a whole lot of work. And it also offers an opportunity for small hive beetles to come in, because it's a couple things. It's a stressor on the colony. They have to rebuild all this damage. They have to haul out all the dead. And small hive beetles are attracted to a protein source, which all that larva is. And
Yeah.
so unless you get bees back on it relatively quick, if you come out there the next day and all your bees are hanging out on the landing board, you've lost that battle. You should have thrown it all away. So
Oh, yeah.
we put all that in a melter, refine it down, and use all that wax to wax foundations. And then
Yes.
if you put really, really heavy wax on those foundations and put them in a box, they'll draw that stuff out so fast it'll blow your mind. Especially a swarm. A swarm will draw it out really fast, but
Oh, yeah.
a good quality will draw it out fast. They'll have it laid back up and be working in it in no time.
Yeah. So when you're going in and doing this cutout, your goal is to get the bees. You're getting the comb out, but you're not trying to frame that up so they can reuse it. And you're just trying to get that wall cavity cleared out for the homeowner.
Yeah. And another thing we do, and this really flies in the face of some people, is we take all that cutout comb, we'll take it home and leave it open for our apiary to rob it out. So so it's, anything that you think, unless it's been sprayed. If we know it's been sprayed, and a lot of times it has been. If I know it's been sprayed, it goes in the garbage. I don't want the comb. I don't want the wax. I don't want the honey.
Yeah.
But if it's clean honey and clean wax, I'll bring it back to my place. And my bees, and it's funny how bees have a short memory, but they do have a memory. So 2 or 3 days, they're pretty good at it. So if I do cutouts regularly, when I drive up in my driveway, they attack my truck. I mean, it's like, a bunch of hungry guys on Meals on Wheels just pulled up, and they're in my truck just to see what's see what's there, because there's something good there. They know it is. But so, a lot of people are like, you're bringing disease, you're bringing this and that. Well, I don't see that. I do a lot of testing. I do a lot of observation, a lot of testing, and I just don't see that. So that's another one of those things that I think the disease and treatment for everything under the sun is kind of oversold and not necessary.
Oh, yeah.
So
I
mix bees. I mix bees from all over South Mississippi, South Alabama, South Louisiana. They all come to a couple of different yards, and they get mixed in, and doesn't seem to affect them negatively.
Oh, yeah. When you're doing that cutout, you make the cutout, you're getting the comb out, you're getting the bees out. Are you going back into that cavity and sealing anything on those walls, or are you just closing it back up? I'm hipping my mic and stuff.
Yeah. I have to be careful because I talk with my hands a lot, so I have to be careful not to.
Yeah, my hands were involved, and I'm banging stuff here. So, yeah.
So, yeah, when is this? Yeah, the most important thing cutout is to keep them from coming back. Because if you go do a cutout on somebody's house and all you've done is remove that problem, and you don't take care of, and you don't do preventative maintenance, they're coming back. So you haven't done anything for that person, really. You've wasted some of their money.
Right.
You've wasted some resources. Maybe you got some bees out of it, but unless you do the repairs or direct them to have the repairs done, and a lot of times I'll leave them with good, solid instructions, and they don't listen. And then they're calling me a year or two later going, "Hey, we got bees back, and can you come look?" And I'm like, "Are they in the same spot?" "Yeah." "Well, I'm not going to come look. It's this much money, and I know where they are already." "What happened to the guy that was going to fix it for you?" "Well, he tried, or he never came out, or whatever." It's like,
Oh, yes.
I gave you very explicitly. I told you, if you do not do this, this, and this, keep my number. I'll see you again in 2 years or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I have that conversation regularly, but if I do the repairs, it's always we seal up the outside, and if that means sealing up one whole side of a house, and it sounds like extensive work, but it's normally not. It's normally a tube of caulk or two. And so a lot of times it's like I say, we're brick veneer meets wood siding, and so we'll go along there. If there's any loose siding, we'll screw it down tight or nail it down tight, and then run a bead of brick caulk. So DAP makes a color of caulk. It's called concrete, but it matches almost all mortar. So
yes.
you run a bead of caulk, tape it off so you're not getting caulk all over the brick, because that's a mess. Tape it off, caulk it off, and they won't have any problems for a lot of years until the house moves or settles or something rots or something. So in most cases, especially between floors, you can fill the cavity you just took bees out of, but they can get to everyone around it. And the scent is there, and the scent's never going away. So if I stuff this cavity full of insulation, that one won't get bees back in it, but the floor joist next to it on either side will the next time, if you don't correct the outside problem. So correcting the problem outside, or filling the hole they got in, or a lot of times it's on commercial buildings. It's where somebody installed a light fixture and there's a gap above or below the fixture, or something. It's something small, and on residential, a lot of times it's something small. And sometimes, even when I do agree to do repairs, if I get in there, and especially around chimneys, the framing might be rotten because the chimney flashing's been leaking, and there's holes, and that's how the bees got in to begin with. Or maybe squirrels have chewed in, and that's where the bees, they came into an old squirrel's nest or whatever. A lot of times I get into those places, and I'm like, I'll bring them out when we're done. I'm like, I could put this back, but you really need a framer to come out here and reframe on this side of the chimney, redo this section of the roof, and then seal this up. Because if you don't, I can close it up. You've got rot issues, or termites, or whatever it is. And so just guiding them the best I can. If I don't have time to do the repairs, and it's not that I can't, it's just that handyman doesn't pay as much as bee removal.
Oh, yes.
So while I'm there, I'm going to take care of the issues, unless I don't have time. And then I'll tell them exactly, this is what you need to do.
Oh, yeah.
Call me if you have any questions, or have your guy call me when he gets out, and they don't ever call. So they either do what I say or they don't. And if they don't, then I get to call again a couple years later, and we go through the whole thing again.
Yes. On those bees that you get from the cutout, are you taking them back to the apiary and treating them like a swarm, locking them up for 48 hours?
Mm-hmm. I do. And depending on the time of the year, and depending on the condition they were in when I pull them out, sometimes they'll get a feeder and sometimes they don't. If they're in pretty good shape, I'm smoking them a lot during the cutout, so a lot of them are eaten already.
Oh, yeah.
So they're full. A lot of times they're full when I get them, or when I vac them. They've had an opportunity to take down enough honey that if they didn't get it, somebody else did. There's enough honey in there that they can last a while. So locking them down for 2 days, it's not an issue most of the time. But if I pull a colony that's dry, it has no resources. If there's a queen in there, I'll generally keep her, even if she's no good. I'll keep her. But if they're dry on resources, a lot of times I'll put a feeder on those. Because you lock them down for another 2 days, they need water just like we do. and they need
Oh,
food
yeah.
just like we do. But if 2 days is not bad. You lock them in, ventilated in a shade somewhere where they're not going to overheat, because they're easy to overheat. Like I said, I told you I'm not a cold weather beekeeper, but I do find that they can endure cold a lot easier than they can endure extreme heat.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
One
So
thing
we do lock those down for 48 hours.
Oh, yeah. And one thing you mentioned there that I really hadn't thought about, but you're smoking those bees when you're getting them out. If you're inside a house, are you still smoking them? Does that leave much smoke
If I'm in
afterfill or
if I'm
whatever?
in an abandoned structure, we have the liberty of using a smoker. If I'm in a residence, an occupied residence or apartment or whatever, we never use smoke because it leaves that whole place smelling like a campfire.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. You mentioned smoke, and I'm like, how do you get that out of somewhere if you do it there?
They do have
Yeah.
that. Oh, here it is. Aposalis, that battery powered vape thing
Oh, yeah.
that I'm I'm tempted to try it, but the kit's $245 for this thing.
Oh, yes.
And, I guess you're on the hook to buy juice from them, whatever the liquid
Yeah.
is they use. But I've heard from people that have them and have tried them that they're not that great.
Oh, yes.
So I don't know that I want to waste my time with that.
Yeah, the entrance fee is kinda expensive there just to try it and see how it goes.
It is for something that may not work. And you know,
Right.
I don't really, if you know how to work bees and you know your limits, you can work them without a smoker. And I'll take a fair number of stings, but it's not that I want to get stung. It's just that I don't want to have a heat stroke. But I know when I have to suit up, and if I'm working indoors and we don't have any other way of cooling them down, then I will suit up to finish the job. But
Oh, yeah.
there's other ways. There's sometimes it works to spray them with sugar water or other things just to keep them from flying on you, but that doesn't take the attitude out of them. Really, it just keeps them not from going as airborne. But you still hives are layered, so you might spray this layer of bees here, but then there's a whole nother workforce waiting to circulate out, and every time you pull comb, there's more and more. And if you are just drenching them through the whole job,
Yeah.
it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah. Well, very good, Randy. Before we move to the famous 4 questions, you have anything else to add about cutouts or anything else that we may not have talked about that you'd like to bring up?
A lot of people want to know about insurance for cutouts, and so
Oh, yes. Good point.
if you're wanting to do the cutout business, I don't really say everybody has to have insurance, because I did it for a decade with no insurance. Apartment complexes around here require insurance, or they started requiring insurance about 5 or 6 years ago. So that's the only reason that I really carry it now, because I never had a problem before. But I'm also right now retired from it, but 32-year insurance adjuster. So I know,
Oh,
I know a lot about that, and I'm a contractor, so I'm fairly well
oh, yeah.
So I do have insurance now, and I don't necessarily recommend everybody get it. If you're only going to do a couple cutouts, just be careful.
Mhm.
But if you're doing it as a business, especially if you're not in the South, maybe get insurance.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Down here we're handshake. Everybody's, I gotta cut your wall open. Oh yeah, no problem. Go ahead. The further north you get, people are like, oh, you got insurance, you got references, you got this, that, you got a
Oh, yeah.
note from your mother, you got.
Right, yeah. Depends where you are and who you're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Randy, it is time for our famous 4 questions. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. And our first question is, what is your favorite beekeeping related book or resource? And I know you're going to say your YouTube channel, but beyond that.
I don't have a book. I have the Beekeeper's Bible is the first beekeeping book that I ever bought, and I bought it last year just
Oh,
because
yes.
I didn't have any beekeeping books. So probably my favorite resource would be newsletters, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
I just like reading. I like reading people's newsletters. I never really got into reading beekeeping books just because I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was seeing. I didn't really need that. And I had mentors that if I had a question about anything, beekeeping's pretty regional. It's pretty regional. So if I have questions about something here, I can call somebody here. I'm not reading something that somebody in
Oh, yeah.
California. I'm not reading Randy Oliver's work that doesn't may or may not apply to what I'm doing in
Oh,
Mississippi.
yes.
He's in an arid environment, or Ian Stepler up in Canada. He's certainly not going to be doing anything I'm doing. He's a commercial beekeeper in a Canadian climate, which is 180 out from what we're doing down here.
Oh, yeah.
So probably my best resource would be newsletters locally, or just a mentor.
Oh, yeah.
A good mentor is invaluable.
Yeah. Excellent advice. Excellent resources. Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the apiary?
My favorite tool lately for the apiary, for cutouts.
Well, just in general, your favorite tool for your beekeeping journey. How's that?
Okay. My favorite tool lately is a cutout tool that Chris Kinzer has built, and it looks like a mini scythe, and it's for reaching up into spaces where it's hard to get to. And normally when you cut in combs, you're going into the combs, and it's messy, it's tough access. Sometimes you're chopping at an old hard comb. Well, he's built a tool out of rod stock, and the end of it is a sharpened, hardened blade, and it's angled up. So if you can stick it up in the back of a hive and pull, and it just cuts so easy. But
Oh, yes.
you can cut a whole comb section out in seconds where it would take you minutes any other way. So that's my new favorite tool. And Kinzer Homestead or something on YouTube, or Chris Kinzer on Facebook is how you find him if you're interested in that tool. And I should have his information, but I don't. I can get it to you later if you need it.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to put that in our show notes. If someone's interested, they can go there and find a link for it.
Okay.
Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started? And that could be with cutouts or beekeeping in general, however you want to take that.
Anything to do with bees, experiment heavily, form your own opinions. Don't necessarily rely on everybody else to figure out everything for you. In the spring, you almost can't screw up. So just go crazy. Start out in the spring, go nuts with your experimentations. You're going to lose bees. Everybody does. I don't care how good you are. We all lose bees. So don't get disheartened by the loss of a couple colonies, because it's going to happen. But just jump in with both feet and go at it. No fear.
Very good. And, springtime is so wonderful in the grazing world. In May, I think I'm a great grazer. I can manage those animals, but so can everyone else. That time of year makes it easy. And lastly, Randy, where can others find out more about you?
I am on 628 Dirt Rooster on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, depending on what happens there. Any social media that we're on it's 628 Dirt Rooster, and that's the best way to find us. Or at North American Honeybee Expo, or at some state conference we might be at.
Very good. Well, Randy, thank you for coming on and sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.